literally going through the yellow pages and just ringing every design agency, asking them if they got a position, can I send you a CV? You've got to be quite doggedly determined with as well. What I've always done is I've always learned something new from every single job that I've had. How quickly you need to be creative to a strict deadline.
Welcome to the podcast, Chris. I'm super excited to have you here today with us.
Well, thank you very much. I'm looking forward to sharing my insights and experiences. Thanks for inviting me.
My pleasure. I'm very curious to learn about your background. If you can share with us briefly who you are, the industry that you're in, and for how many years you've been in the industry, and also if you can share something unexpected about you that people usually don't guess that easy about you. That would be awesome.
Okay, I'm going to struggle with the last one, but we'll start. Okay, so I currently own a marketing company. Set that up a few years ago now. My background is graphic design. I did a degree in graphic design in the UK. I've been in the industry now for about 15 years, I think. And I've gone from graphic design. I then moved into advertising and worked for some of the larger advertising agencies in the region, and then subsequently set up my own business in advertising and marketing. So that's a very brief background into me. Something unexpected that they might not know. Can I come back to that one? Can I come back to that one? I have to think about that one.
Okay, please remind me to ask it again.
Okay.
The way we usually start these episodes, I'm asking my guests, how do they recharge their batteries? Is there by themselves as introverts, or perhaps in groups as extroverts, or a combination? So how do you see yourself? Introvert, extrovert, ambivert?
Very much extrovert for me. I've always found to kind of unwind, it's always been with a group of friends, either industry friends or not industry friends. I think sometimes it's good to just get away completely from what you've been doing and experiencing with work, and sometimes you want to speak to like-minded people and get their kind of perspective on things and their experiences. So I think either way works for me, but it's definitely with a group of people.
Awesome. That's great to have a fellow extrovert here on the podcast. Really exciting. So because I am upfront with my audience, I always share that we had the questions that we're going to be asking shared with our guests, and in the end of the day, it's just a conversation. I'm very curious about the graphic designer career, and we want to help other people considering to start this journey. And so that's where we're gonna heading with this conversation. And to get started with this, what is something that you wished you knew when you started your career into this field?
That's actually it's a really good question. It's a really interesting one for people wanting to move into the industry. I kind of think when you go into this, certainly at university, there was kind of an expectation of, kind of cool studios and, amazing projects and, working on the coolest clients. And while that is part of the industry, it's not always like that. And what I've found is while you do get the good projects and they are fun, you've got to kind of cherish those, because there's a lot that aren't as well, but you've still got to give them the same amount of love and affection that you do with the ones that you really want to work on. So, and I think there's an expectation there from someone who's not done the job before. Another one is how quickly you need to be creative to a strict deadline. That's that's quite a thing to get used to. Certainly when you're training and doing your degree, you've got so much time to play around and experiment and come up with different things. And but when in the real world, when you're kind of doing this to a deadline, you've got to be as good and better what you can do in 3 weeks at university. You've got to do in like 2 days.
Oh, wow.
And it's an industry at the end of the day, and people need to make money, and there's deadlines. So that's one thing. If I'd have been told that, I mean, it wouldn't have put me off. But just the kind of it's a nice to know thing, and it can be quite a stressful environment as well. I've found, especially with, like I've mentioned, about the being creative to a deadline, brings its level of stress if you can't crack the kind of the project, if you like, and you've got a deadline looming. Then that brings stress, and it also brings long hours as well. It's not necessarily a 9 to 5 job, which is again, I don't think you get into this to be a 9 to 5 job. But yeah, just kind of be aware that creativity comes when it comes. Do you know what I mean? It's not necessarily I'm going to be creative between the hours of 9 and 5 with an hour lunch.
Yeah, for sure. I can imagine. It's good to have that reality check, and practicing, right? Even from the university, as you said, to get into the habit of just said, if you don't have the deadline, perhaps as a practice, to set yourself as a deadline, to see maybe this time you work past the deadline, maybe a second, a third, a fifth time, you get faster and
Yeah,
your wheel
yeah,
starts to spin
absolutely. I
faster.
think that's probably a good thing to do if you are going to kind of if you are looking into doing this. I'll go back to university again. They will give you a deadline, but it'll be quite a long deadline. But if you can give yourself, if you're doing creative work by yourself, don't let it kind of string out and play on and go on for ages, because then what you're becoming is an artist. You're becoming a graphic artist rather than a graphic designer, and there is a distinction. So if you can give yourself a hard and fast deadline as to I need this to be done by then because I need to present this work, then you're giving yourself more of a kind of a real world experience, if you like.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. Very, very interesting. Um, I'm imagining, that's my assumption, of course, that in the beginning of your career, perhaps you had some setbacks. And if it was your case, how have you dealt with those setbacks, and what kept you going?
Yeah, I mean, there certainly has been setbacks in a number of ways, I guess. But the toughest one when I was starting out was kind of landing that first job. It's the old adage of every business wants someone with experience, but how do you get experience if they won't give you a job, etc., etc. So when I graduated, it was the hardship was landing that first job. I ended up actually coming to Dubai just after I graduated. I got a little break with a family friend who ran an agency out here, so I managed to get some experience under my belt for a few months. That was after quite a lot of conversations and searching, and then that ended, and I went back to the UK and started. I'm from Leeds in Yorkshire originally, so I moved back home and started to search. There was, it was sound really old now, but it was before Google and social media and all the rest of it. So it was, for me, it was, writing to companies, literally going through the yellow pages and just ringing every design agency, asking them if they got a position. Can I send you a CV? Can I come in and do some work experience? Anything I could to get through the front door. Really, that was the hardship, and that's what you've got to be quite doggedly determined with as well. And employers like that, and they want to see you really they want to see a hunger in you for this job. So that will go a long way, and that's kind of how I kind of got quite a few interviews and work experience by I mean, the phrase is kind of brass necking it, if you like, by just ringing up and just asking, "Have you got something?" And I've kind of ultimately failed initially in my job search in Leeds, where I was from. So like, cast my net wider and wider and wider, and I ended up ringing a company in Edinburgh, um, which is probably a 5-hour drive away from where I live. And he just happened to say, "Yes, I'm actually looking for someone. What a strange time for you to just kind of call." And he said, "Why don't you come up for an interview?" So I jumped on the train and went up for an interview. He was a very nice guy. I didn't think I'd got it because he was interviewing a few people, but lo and behold, a few weeks later, he rang me up and said, "Yep, absolutely. You came across really well. I loved your portfolio. I loved your enthusiasm, and would you care to move up to Edinburgh and work here?" So I was like, "Yeah, absolutely fantastic." So that was my first break into the industry, I guess. Yeah, so in short, the setbacks were just landing that first job and how kind of doggedly determined you needed to be, because there's a lot of competition.
Hmm. And I can imagine for an introvert, 'cause I'm an introvert, so I can imagine that, because I can see myself trying to do what you're doing and getting discouraged like after the first few no's. So when you kept hearing no's and no's and no's, what kept you going?
Again, another good question. I've had plenty of my peers who I trained with who would consider themselves introverts as well, and they struggled with that as well. Certainly, a few people. I'm still in touch with them and very good friends with them now, and they really struggled to kind of really push themselves through the door of the agencies in fear of rejection, or just being shy to go in and talk to someone. But my kind of resilience came from I originally left school thinking I wanted to be an architect, and I managed to get myself a position in a house building firm in Leeds after I graduated school, and they were going to put me through college, etc., etc. Now I quickly realised that I didn't want to do that. After about a year of being an office junior and going to college, and kind of fell into really being a real estate agent for about 3 years. And did that, enjoyed it, enjoyed the job, showing people around houses and selling property and all the rest of it. That was good, but it didn't kind of scratch that creative itch for me. And I was just about kind of the ish enough. I was a little bit older than the other students, but I decided that I was just still young enough to go back to college, get my A levels, and do a career that I wanted to do. So I think because I'd had that initial launch into the job world, if you like, and realised that I wanted to go back to college to do something that I actually wanted to do, that was enough of a spur for me to just, when people are saying no, 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 it was still enough of a spur to make me think I'd still desperately want to make a success of this career, because it's something I've sacrificed, or I've already sacrificed a potential career to go back and do this, because I really wanted to do it. So that was my kind of spur for keeping on going.
That's very interesting. And thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Yeah, no problem, no problem.
Yeah, it's very encouraging to learn all of this. As I said, it's hard to get out there, and but when you see that, as you mentioned, you have that creative juice, and you feel that is your calling, and you give it your best. In the end of the day, sitting in the discomfort is not the worst thing that can happen to us, right? So a bit of discomfort to get
Yeah, I
that
mean,
job and to keep trying definitely it has its payoffs.
yeah, well, I mean, it's kind of it's kind of the thing, why would you sit in the discomfort and keep going and trying to drive through it until you get to a place where you're happy? Like, you don't just sit in the this comfort zone. You're going to get out of it at some point. You just got
Mm.
to keep pushing. And like all industries, and certainly creative industries, art, for example, and even modeling, there's a lot of rejection and there's a lot of no's, and it's a very subjective industry. So what's good for someone isn't good for someone else, and it is a question of landing on that right person at the right time. It's not necessarily a question of you're doing something wrong or you're not good enough. It's just you haven't found the right avenue yet.
Yeah. I'm making mental notes. Cool. Um, if we are to look back, what's one advice that you received when you were in your 20s that changed your perspective when pursuing this career as a graphic designer?
Yeah, I think probably not necessarily a piece of advice, but certainly kind of I don't know, a general kind of understanding from me. And I did get told this by a few people in the design industry, but there's no such thing as a wrong first job in the industry, because a lot of people I studied with wanted to work for this specific agency in London, or this kind of design house, and they were very specific on what they wanted to do, but kind of had no way of knowing if they'd be able to get there or not. So they kind of pigeonholed themselves very quickly. And someone said to me, look, there's no such thing as a wrong first job, and that has turned out to be absolutely true. Whether it's in-house at a company or you work in agency side. Now, what I've always done is I've always learned something new from every single job that I've had, whether it's a positive experience or a negative experience. I've always learned a new skill at every single job that I've had. So the first job I had, I learned a lot about kind of magazine design and very kind of hardcore, very kind of granular skills of typography, which I didn't know coming out of university. Another job I went to, they were very good at packaging design, and very kind of strict on that. And they were very good at mocking things up in Photoshop and making it look very realistic. So I kind of got that skill set from going there. And every single job I've taken something away from it. It might have been, kind of a negative experience at the time in terms of feeling like I had to leave or move on or whatever the situation was. But I've always managed to kind of take something from it that's kind of added to my skills as a designer. So just get a job in the industry. You can always move on, but don't panic about kind of where you work for now.
Mm. Yeah, and I feel that is such a valuable advice because, especially when we are young, we just, mm, or at least because I'm 35 now, almost 35. um, so I don't know how kids are right now in their 20s, but I was like 10 years, 15 years ago, I had that mindset of like I need to make less mistakes, or I need to figure it out, have everything set out. And now we live in such a uncertain world that there is no certain path. What we have is our self beliefs. As you said, to have the mentality or going into any job that we're doing was like, how can I maximize or learn as much as I can from this, and ask questions and reach out, ask for help. So yeah, definitely I can see how that can help somebody in their 20s as well.
I've got one more piece of advice as well for someone at university, and that was sorry, going back to my experience again, was at university when you see people getting better grades than you, and you kind of, it's frustrating because you put so much work into it and you end up not getting the grade that you want. But I would say don't chase the grade, chase the portfolio, because that's what people are going to judge you on at the end of the day. I'm not going to say it doesn't matter what grade you get at your degree. It does. And you want to do the best that you can. But the most important thing for me is get the portfolio that you're happy with, even if it doesn't reach the grade of what the tutor says. If you're happy with it, then that's what you're aiming for as well at the end of the day. Because as I said, it is a subjective industry, and I've been to interviews where I wasn't, I didn't get the grade that I wanted for certain projects, and I was reluctant to put it in my portfolio because it didn't get the grade at college. But when I went to the interview, the person who was interviewing me thought that was my strongest piece of work because it spoke to them and something I could never even kind of comprehend. But they were like, "Oh wow, yeah, no, that's great." And I kind of came away from the interview going, "All right." They thought what I thought was my worst piece of work in the weakest part of my portfolio, they found was the strongest. So yeah, I suppose don't chase the grades.
That's a very good advice. Yeah. I'm sure it's going to be very, very useful. So talking about, I had such a great insights when I was asking this question, because this is not in the questions that you received from
Right.
our
Okay.
initial briefs. I was like, off the grid.
Just going to throw me a curveball, are you?
Yes. So if we're to consider a scale of 1, you were the worst at it, or 10, you were amazing at it, how good were you at asking for help in your 20s?
In regards to just contextualize the question a little bit, in regards to my work or personal life, or what
Both
do you
of
mean?
them. Yeah, if you can give me if there is like a different grade, please do share.
In terms of work, then I was definitely getting towards a 10 for asking for help. I kind of recognized very quickly that as soon as I'm out of university and I got into the first kind of couple of jobs, I realized how much I didn't know. So just, I was the typical example of leaving university thinking, right, I'm a qualified designer, I know what I'm doing. And then you realize that, the experience counts for such a lot. And, you can sort of quickly, when you've been in the first few jobs, understand why people want experience to, when they're looking for candidates. I totally forgot where I was going with that now. I'm so sorry.
How good were you at asking
Oh
for
yeah,
help?
asking
And
for
you
help.
said
Yeah,
it
so
was a
I think
10.
just very quickly recognizing that I didn't have the experience and other people did, and you know, ask them, ask the people with experience. If don't worry about thinking it's a stupid question or being kind of intimidated to ask. Like everyone's been in the same position as you. So the seniors have been juniors and they've been graduates and they've not known. And, some will have asked, some won't have asked, some will regret not asking. So just ask away, ask all the questions you need to. And, if you get on people's nerves by asking, they'll soon tell you. But yeah, like you've got to make sure that you're getting the best kind of experience out of each job you do and every situation you're in. So yeah, ask away.
And in your personal life?
Yeah, probably less so in my personal life, to be honest. I'm quite kind of confident with work and less so with me personally. Yeah, I haven't got any specific examples, but yeah, in terms of work, I've been very kind of gung ho in being able to push myself forwards. In terms of, like my worst fear is standing up and talking in front of people, and I've never been able to conquer that. And I've always hated presenting my own work. I'm probably come across as quite, everyone said, "Oh, really? You really kind of struggle in front of people because you come across like very confident." But I really, honestly, it's my worst nightmare is standing up and speaking publicly, and even presenting my own work to people. I find that I trip up
And
over my
that's a
own words and I
major.
forget what I'm saying. And even if I know everything about the project, I'm still sweaty palms and nervous, and it's never gone away from me.
And to be honest, I think public speaking and presenting in front of others is something that most people struggle with. And even those who've done it as a professional career might still get the nerves before presenting, or sweaty palms, or like maybe tension in the bodies, all of those physical
Absolutely,
symptoms. Yeah, I still do. So yeah, I totally understand. Yeah.
I'm nervous talking in front of you now just because I know it's been recorded.
But it doesn't look like so.
Okay, fair enough. As long as it doesn't look like it, then that's okay.
And to be honest, it's great that we're able to share how we feel in this particular situation, because I would imagine for me, what really made the difference is when I saw another coach explaining how she felt, how the beginnings were for her, like for her first programs, she didn't sell anything. And that made me feel like, oh, I'm actually okay. I'm actually a human being going through a similar experience. And that just made me feel much better with myself. And it's like,
yeah, absolutely.
Learning in progress. Cool. So if you can share with us, what are some misconceptions people have about this industry?
Okay, that's an interesting one. I think I've kind of had this certainly from outsiders of the industry. When you say you're a graphic designer and you work in a design studio and it's kind of seen as a bit of an arty kind of airy fairy industry, and it really isn't. It really isn't that at all. It's very, like I've previously said, it's quite high pressured. Coming up with creative solutions to a deadline is very difficult and keeps you in the office for long hours. And it's a job that you have to do and you have to be passionate about, because otherwise you will give up. That's the kind of the most brutally honest. If you don't love it and really want to do it, you won't get there. That's as blunt a point as I can make. Also, the other one, the kind of the misconception of, floating around a funky office and, working on big blue chip clients and all the rest of it. You will get that, and I've done that to a degree in the bigger advertising agencies, but it's not waltzing around a cool office drinking, cucumber water in the afternoon. It's a lot more serious and dedicated than that. And I think that's probably a misconception from, students to the industry and outsiders to the industry as well.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, because in the end of the day, the whole concept of this podcast is to break the glamour from the outside. Like how I see it is very glamorous, right? And then saying like, hey, this is the reality. It might look like glamorous, but as long as we can understand the reality and then we can adjust our expectations, then we're fine. We can manage the setbacks. We can build the resilience to pursue this career.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. If you know exactly what you're getting into, then you can make an informed decision. That makes complete sense.
Awesome. What's one piece of advice you would offer somebody looking to join this industry?
I think going sort of on running on from my last point, I'd say is that I'd say make sure that you enjoy the subject. I think that's absolutely paramount. I mean, that's why people get into this industry. You get into design, and I subsequently moved to art direction and advertising, and you do it because you absolutely love it. So if you don't, then don't. That's again as brutally as I can put it. Now I did sort of going back to my experience again when I was at university. I did a research paper, and the subject It was given to us as a, as a class to do it. Each person did their own research, and it was graphic design. Is it art or is it industry? And I went away and did my research, and it pretty much came out 50-50 in terms of people thinking it was an art form and people thinking it was an industry. And I think there's a little bit of danger in that, depending on what you're getting into the industry for. My experience as being a commercially driven graphic designer is that it falls very heavily on the industry. And like I said, there's a distinction between graphic artist and graphic designer. So if you want to be a graphic designer, that's very much an industry thing. You're going to work for an agency or yourself to strict deadlines and all the rest of it. And you need to be very kind of strategic in your thinking. Your work is not going to be about personal symbolism. It's not going to be, I want to design this because of this, that, and the other. It's going to be, I'm designing this because I am answering a creative problem for a client, if that makes sense. You're not designing for yourself in a sense, although you're going to have an influence over what's designed and how and why. But you are doing it primarily on behalf of someone else because they need you to design a problem. They need you to kind of answer a visual problem for them. So you've got to be kind of quite strategic in your thinking. You've got to understand how to sell and speak about a rationale as to why you've done what you've done. It's not about, I want to do this because it looks nice. Do you know what I mean? There's very much a distinction there. And that would be, what was the, how do I sum this up? What piece of advice for joining your industry? Yeah, I think know what you're getting into the industry for. If you want to be a graphic artist, that's fantastic. Enjoy it and produce your own work, and that's fantastic. If you want to be a graphic designer, understand that you're going into an industry that makes money from creativity.
Yeah, thank you so much for having that distinction. I didn't know about those two fields, so I'm sure it's
Yeah, well, I mean,
going to be very.
you can be an artist that subject matter is graphic design, and you produce your own work to your own brief, and make a gallery or sell your work online, whatever you want to do, and there's no problem with doing both of those. You can absolutely be both, but I wouldn't bring your graphic artistry into your industry space. I'd keep the two separate.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense for sure. Cool. Thank you so much for sharing that. Is there anything else you'd like to share that I haven't asked you yet?
I think I've covered quite a lot of the bases in the questions that you've already asked, to be honest. I can go in. I mean, if any of your listeners want a further discussion, I will happily go through and answer any specific questions that they've got. Part of the reason we set up our business a few years ago was because we wanted to get into a space where we were working on projects and working with clients that wanted to make a positive impact in the world, and work on projects and promote those companies, rather than just designing for anyone and everything. Kind of done that with the bigger agencies I've worked for in my career. We really wanted to do something that was going to be, kind of creative for good, if you like.
Yeah, that's
And
very
part
inspiring.
of that is to create a business and create an environment where people are happy to work. Now, I'll say this: it's not the nicest thing to hear, but as a creative, you get into the industry because you absolutely love it, and that's what I did. And that's, I got into advertising, which was fantastic, very, very creative. But the industry side of it, means that there's always someone trying to make money out of it, which is fine, but it's usually at your expense, in terms of long hours, working long into the night, staying at the office. And yeah, sometimes it's not a nice place to be when the pressure builds up like that. So it's not nothing I can sort of prepare you for. It's sort of something you got to experience for yourself, I guess. But yeah, we wanted to create an environment where we kind of rewarded creators for doing something that they love, rather than taking advantage of someone who's doing something that they love, if you know what I mean.
Yes, yes, I understand. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that.
No problem.
What's next for you? 2020, 2021? What are your plans?
Well, yes, exactly. So, like I said, we've set up our own agency. It's called the Up Agency, and we called it that because we want to focus on we've dubbed it uplifting creativity. So it's anything that leaves a positive impact in people's lives or helps the world in any way. We want to be the de facto agency that helps them with their creativity, with their communications, with their branding, with their advertising, and their strategy as well for attracting new clients and retaining them as well. So that's kind of we've been building this up for the last few years. So yeah, we just want to keep driving home that mantra that we believe in. And also, from our research, it looks like that's where the market's heading as well.
For sure.
So, if your brand isn't making a positive impact, or then people are. I'm just going to divert to another point now. Sorry, people are starting to kind of vote with their wallets in terms of the businesses and brands that they want to buy from. And I don't think it's not going to be a nice to have in the next few, in the very near future. Customers are going to expect that you're, socially responsible. Your product doesn't affect the planet in a negative way. There's no human rights violations involved in what you're selling, because people will stop buying from you because they will go to a competitor that is doing these things. So it's going to become very, very necessary for businesses to change for good, in order to them to attract the clients that they want to attract.
And I'm so happy that the world is shifting towards this, because we need these type of businesses, or for us as customers to be able to choose a company or brand that is representing our values and gives back to the society and encourages sustainable living, for sure.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. And those are the kind of businesses that we want to be involved in. And that's literally why we set up our business in the way that we have. And yeah, we just think it's going to be very necessary for businesses to change in that way, moving forwards.
Yay, I'm so happy. Great. How can people get in touch with you? What's the best place for them to search for you?
Yeah, they can search for us. We're on social media. So we are the Up Agency, and we've got our website, which is upagency.org. Or do you want my email address? It's christopher.hunt@upagency.org.
Perfect. We'll make sure that we have all those links in the show notes.
Lovely. Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's been such an inspiring conversation, and I learned so much. As I said, I made mental notes, and of course I'm going to have the replay and the YouTube video, so I'm going to go back and make physical notes as well.
Lovely. That's great. No, well, I've enjoyed talking about it, to be honest. It's been quite a long time since I've spoken about my kind of early experiences as a as a designer. So yeah, no, I've actually quite enjoyed it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, no worries. Thank you.